So today I'm going to show you the very basics of centering and throwing a cylinder on the potter's wheel. I have about a pound of clay here, right, about the size of a baseball. So you want to, from the beginning, you want to take care of the clay. So you want a nice round ball of clay. You don't want this misshapen, weird thing. It's make it harder on you to center the clay. So you're going to start with either dry or damp wheel. You can have it damp but not wet. That's really important. Anything wet, the clay is going to slide. It's not going to stick. So I'm going to go there and slam it down. And then if you miss off center, no big deal. I'm just going to slide it into the center, into the rings. I'm just use my hands to kind of help push it down before I even start the wheel. And then you can get that clay pretty close to being centered without doing much. I'm going to add my water. All right, you want to spin at a moderate speed. You want to make sure your wheel is going counterclockwise direction. So the first part of centering, there's two parts. You want to bring the clay up and cone it up, and then we're going to force it down into the actual dome shape. So the first part of this, I'm going to take my hands like this and create a shape like that, a wall of fingers there. So very important. You got your elbows down and then your thighs and connected to your body so they're stable, right? You can't center anything if you're not centered yourself. So I'm going to pull towards me, and as I pull towards me, I'm going to force the clay into this kind of shape with the butts of my hands. It's going to look like this. All right? Bring it up with the height of your hand. Any higher than that, it will be hard to control that and bring it back down. All right, so the second part, I'm going to use my left hand. This is my karate chop hand. Hi-yah! And I'm going to use this part of my hand right here. I'm not going to grab the clay. I'm going to just use that part of my hand right here. Now the other hand, I'm going to kind of cup it. I'm going to use right where my hand bends, right across the back of my knuckles, in front of my hand. That's the epicenter where I'm going to push the clay. And it's going to carry on down into here and just up into my finger a little bit. You don't want to use your fingers, right? So I'm going to stick my thumb up, split my fingers, and it's going to put my hands in the position I want to be in. So you can kind of see how my right hand, right, it's going to kind of push down and in at a 45-degree angle, right? If I come in too far this way, it's going to push that clay back up. If I go too much this way, you'll see I'll get this mushroom top. So you want to be able to push into the center of the wheel, right, centering with that right hand. This hand is going to support your right hand, and it's going to give a little push at the bottom. It's going to look like this. It's very important, whenever you touch the clay, the wheel should be spinning before you touch the clay. Don't touch it if it's not spinning. Every time you touch the clay, you want to start really soft, as you know, so it doesn't affect the clay at all. I keep my hands here all day. And then you slowly add pressure, and then when you're done, you slowly take that pressure off. All right, so once that clay is centered, I'm going to start, I have to start a hole, right? So I'm going to go back to my karate chop position here. Use my left thumb to kind of locate the center of the clay. And I'm going to keep my thumb locked out like this, right? So I'm going to use the tip of my thumb to kind of guide my finger down into the clay, but I want that back pressure from that angle of my thumb so I can keep that clay centered as I go down. If you try to go straight down in, it's hard, and if you're a beginner, you're going to be all over the place. It's going to hurt you more. So it's going to look like this. I'm going to use my other two fingers that kind of help push on that thumb, but I'm going to use my sponge here so I can keep that water on there the whole time. All right, and I want to slow down towards the bottom and stop short of the bottom. And then I'm going to take my needle tool and measure. So I'm going to stick it in there, draw my finger down until it touches the clay, and that's going to give me what I need there. It's about 3/8 of an inch. All right, so from here, I have a shape in the bottom of my clay. The clay is about 3/8 of an inch at the bottom. I have a V shape in the bottom of my clay. So what I want now for that cylinder is I want a right angle. So now I have to establish the bottom of this pot, or this cylinder. So I'm going to go back to my karate chop. I'm going to take my my pointer finger and my middle finger, and I'm going to kind of hook them over. I'm going to even them up, right, because one finger is longer than the other. I'm going to even them up. I'm going to get a hook underneath there, right? So I'm going to hook those fingers. I'm going to pull both hands back. This hand does not push forward at all. It's just stabilizing this hand right here. Make sure it's wet. And you're going to hook, and then you're going to bring both those hands back. Now, important when you do that, the bottom's never going to stay perfectly flat. You're going to have to go back in and compress the bottom. You want to make it look nice, but that compressing action is very important for the future. Now, right? But if you don't compress that bottom, you could get cracks later on, you know, going into the kiln or out of the kiln even. So that clay has that kind of particle infrastructure like a sponge. You want to kind of squeeze it in and compress all those so everything's nice and tight. Right. So from here, I'm going to pull up the sides, and you can see the magic happen here. Right. So I'm going to use my middle finger and your thumb, and you're going to be around in that 3 to 6 o'clock position. My right hand is my cheeseburger. So if you just touch it like that and grab it, you want it just like that, just like you're eating a cheeseburger. You can't grab it tight. You want those fingers in that position, real loose. So I'm going to take this finger and place it on top of that thumb there, and I'm going to lock these thumbs together. This is known as the claw. This is the most stable position that you can get on the potter's wheel. And then usually you're going to do it the first, maybe the second pull. But I'm going to keep my sponge in there. I'm going to create that position. I'm going to make a groove there, right? Now, what's happening here, when I have that groove there, we have this overhang right here. So if I keep my fingers that same position, when I lift that up, this overhang has nowhere to go as long as I don't jump over top of that. And that's going to force that clay in a spiral to come up into the air. It's going to look like this. I'm not pinching hard. I'm just keeping that position underneath that groove. Right, when I get to the top, I'm going to let my fingers kind of float off and kind of touch there. I'm going to go back and kind of compress the top so it keeps it straight. But very important, you want these fingers across from each other at all times. Now sometimes this finger is going to be above or below that outside finger, right? But as long as they're applying pressure at the same point and not kind of offset at all, that'll create problems for you if you can't do that. So when I make the groove on the inside and the outside, right, this groove here represents my outside finger. This hump here represents my inside finger. So you can see they're offset a little bit, right? Pinching in, I'm going to grab and I'm going to pull that up. And I'm not really pinching that hard. I'm just keeping that position, right? Truly, unless you get into really big pieces of clay, I'm talking like 15, 20 pounds of clay, you should be able to pull this up in about 3 pulls. Do that one more time. A beginner mistake is putting too much pressure with the inside hand and making that the dominant hand. And what's going to happen is the very basic principles of clay is if you push there, it's going to go there. So if I'm pushing here, it's going to fold out into a bowl real quick. So the correction to that is to really think of this hand as offering resistance and this hand being your dominant hand. You're pushing into that hand, but you're holding this one steady. So this is about a pound of clay, maybe a tad bit more. That's about the cylinder you're going to get with that. Now, if it's skinnier, it's going to be a little taller. If it's wider, it's going to be a little shorter. The next tools I'll show you are pottery ribs. So the little history lesson, the pottery wheel was invented somewhere in the time between 5000 and 3500 BC. That's a long time ago. And that's actually before they even had wheels on carts or chariots and things like that. So the pottery wheel was in essence the first wheel ever invented. So these ribs were most likely animal bones, animal ribs that you can use to kind of use on the sides of pieces. So you can see the throwing lines on the side. I can put my fingers in those holes. I'm going to push into my inside hand, and that'll clear off the outsides. If it's off center a little bit, you might be able to kind of shape that up a little bit with that. The metal one, there's a flexible metal one. It's a little trickier to use. If you're a beginner, you can really cause a lot of problems until you learn how to use it. But this will cut the clay more, so if you really want to ultra kind of smooth that outside, kind of cuts that clay off. Be careful peeling that off, just go slow. You can get a kind of cut on your finger. The other cool thing about this is these bend, right? So if you want to do like a shape, you pre-bend that, pre-shape that, and then kind of push into that with the inside hand. right? If you push there, it goes there. So all I did is push more with my inside hand and offered resistance with my outside with the rib. You can do a reverse curve here, right, to get a shape. So this is my favorite tool with the diversity you can use with it and the different things you can do with it. But again, as a beginner, you're going to have to go through a learning process with that. You can really kind of mess some things up until you know what you're doing. All right, the next tool is the digger tool. So this one has no really cool explanation of its history, only that it digs into the clay. So especially at the beginner, you're going to have a lot of this excess clay out here. So you're going to use this digger tool to get as much off there as you can so you don't have to do it later. Now here's a trick here. So in the beginning I told you if you put water on the pottery wheel, the clay's not going to stick. So now if I put water in that little moat there, it's only connected at the wheel, it's disconnected from the pot. But if I go underneath that now with a flat needle tool, because I put water there, that's not going to stick. That's going to come right up. And at the end, I'm going to put a little groove at the bottom. Again, that cleans things up and kind of makes things, that'll make it easier to take it off the wheel. When I do this, I put a little water on the back side of the wheel, especially for beginners. Going to wrap your wire. Very importantly, you want to keep your hands, your thumbs down when you pull through it. Don't pull up. When you do that, you can you never want to touch the top. All you do now is push the bottom. If that doesn't slide easily, you would repeat that process. So it's sticking on there. Put a little more water there, put it off your wire, pull that through again, and see, it'll slide right away. And you kind of slide that off onto your back. So the next step is I would get all the water off your wheel. You can use your digger tool or any of the wood tools to kind of keep it flat and go in, tear off that clay, and then use your sponge to clean your wheel. And now you're ready to get more clay and go at it again.